Well, good morning, guys. So, today is the start of Memorial Day weekend, and for actual exotic flips, I thought, at least in my opinion, it would be interesting if I tried to speed run, get the Panda completely done, hopefully get this thing listed, and get on with the series. So, by doing that, instead of doing like one day, one episode, I'm gonna basically, I'll keep a little tracker, and we'll see how many days it takes to get everything hooked up. The issue is with Panda, everything's so small that even if I try to record everything that I'm doing, you're not going to see everything that I'm doing just because my hands and whatnot will be in the way, just because there's not enough space in the hood to see, all these little electrical connections and whatnot. And it's going to be a lot of chasing my tail. Fortunately, I did not do a very good job at taking pictures of everything that I took off. I do have a little bit of footage, obviously, for the channel, but certain things, for example, I need to hook up the shifter, and I didn't even take any pictures or anything of me taking it apart. So there's going to be a lot of chasing my tail, getting things together. I guess future sense, if you are taking anything apart, make sure it doesn't hurt to take too many pictures. Too many pictures is definitely better than not enough. See the lake out there. But yeah, that's pretty much about it. So I will meet you into the garage.
What is up, Matthew? Actual Exotic Flip. So this is the Memorial Weekend special. Basically, I spent the entire long weekend doing anything I could to get the car running, going, and hopefully finish the season ASAP. So on the last episode, I basically discussed briefly how I kind of skipped over the camshaft, and the footage for that just didn't really turn out right. So I re-recorded just so you can see. I want you to see every step of this process. I don't really want to cut any steps that I don't have to. And before I put the engine back into the car, I took a quick second just so you could check out the camshaft and how that works.
Pretty simple. It's not like there's anything really complicated. So it's overhead cam. So what that means is the camshaft is above everything overhead, hence the name. Because of that, it doesn't have rockers or anything like that. I actually kind of prefer overhead cams, but just because they're easier to get to. Definitely something with newer engines, though. You don't really see them as much with the older type. Alright, valve cover is about to come off. So there's just 4 10mm bolts, pretty simple, or 10mm socket head, I should say. 10mm head. Hex bolts. And that's it. So this is the camshaft. There's these little cups that go in there. So basically, I don't know if you can even see that. There's these little pockets that actually go to the valves. On the other side there. And basically, these are lobed, and these spin. They hit those cups. Cups go down, and they push the valves down. There's spring on the valves, and that's how they go up and down. And the valve, make sure, this is 2 valves for each cylinder. Some cars have more. This one only has 2. One's an intake, one's an exhaust. So one basically puts gas in, and the other takes exhaust out. That's hooked up to a pulley right here. And that's where the timing belt goes on. So when the camshaft and the crankshaft have a certain sequence, they have to be aligned to these lobes with the actual crankshaft, and that is your timing. So that's what that is. So yeah, that's basically the camshaft on a Fiat Panda. There's really nothing more to it. I do have a new valve cover gasket that came with the kit, which is very nice, and that's pretty much it. So this is the timing belt cover. I put that on, I believe, off camera. Nothing special about that, really. I had everything marked before I took it off, so putting everything back together in the right sequence was pretty simple. But let's get on with the rest of this engine rebuild. I guess the engine rebuild's already done, but hopefully get everything in the car, and hopefully everything's working good to go, and my oil issue will be a thing of the past.
Alright, so getting the engine into the car. So the engine actually came out from the bottom. So in my mind, the best way to get it up, because everything has to be rotated just right, there are a couple of hooks on the exhaust manifold, and I think there was another one on the transmission somewhere. So using those, I was able to lift it up and put some straps on, and the idea was to get it above the hood, since the hood was off, lift it up on a cherry picker, and that way we could kind of rotate it in. It's kind of weird the way I've never really seen an engine like this. There's two engine mounts on the transmission side, and then there's only one on the engine side. So I'll show you some footage of that some point later in the video. But basically, it wasn't too difficult because you got to realize this engine's not too heavy, especially with all the fluids out of it. So basically pumping it up to somewhat get it lined up. I think we had to shift it to the side a bit. And then from there, I want to say we used like a floor jack or something like that to get it just right, just to get the bolts started. Obviously, once the bolts are started, it's a pretty simple job. It's not very complicated. And you can see right here, that's the one engine mount I was talking about. That's literally the only engine mount, technically. The other two are on the transmission. So I definitely would not just drop, even if you just drop the transmission for a clutch change or something, I would definitely support the engine in some way because there's only one mount actually holding it up, which is kind of scary to think about. There's a little floating bracket on the other side, and that's what holds up the transmission. There's a couple studs on there. I mean, honestly, there's really not a lot holding this up. Granted, it is a pretty small engine. So you can see in the back there, I think there's like a 4x4 on a jack, on a floor jack, and that's basically how we got that in position. And I'm basically just getting those nuts on the floor started there. It's kind of hard. I think I said that before the video. In the beginning of the video, it's kind of hard getting, I guess, good footage just given the fact how small and some of the weird angles everything are. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just pretty much three nuts that hold the entire engine and transmission in the car, and that's it. So finishing that up here, and soon after that we will begin the next step.
Alright guys, engine is completely put on and on engine stands. So engine mounts, there's two on the transmission side. This is literally the only one for the engine right there. I don't even know if I go down here, if you can see them at all right there. It's basically a bracket with a couple studs on it. But engine's all in to go. Basically, I need to get all these other connections put on. And that'll be it. It's going to take me a while. I don't know if I'll get it all done today, but I will do the best I can, and we'll see how much I get done. Well, I think you guys all know the drill by now. It is time-lapse time.
Alright guys, so basically next step, or at least I was trying to do everything reverse from the way that I took it apart, just so it was easier to remember. And you got to realize there's so many components to this. Trying to keep track of everything is pretty difficult. So this is the prop shaft, and this is literally just held on by some socketed cap screws. I got that knocked out real quick. After that, I was basically trying to get the CVs popped back in. So you see me doing that right here. Basically fast forwarded through all the stuff that I guess you don't really need to see. So basically just getting the splines fit back in, and that wasn't too difficult of a task. So next, those are the wheel nuts, and then again, I'm getting the other side hammered in there real quick. And basically, those are the bolts that I got to get in. So getting all the control arms in, getting all of that taken care of. It did want me to split the ball joint. That's what the manual said to get this out, and it was actually way easier. We had a ton of difficulty trying to get those out. It was way easier just to take off the control arms and just drop the entire thing. It's not a big deal if it still has the CVs in there or not. I don't really know why it recommended that, but that's basically what I am doing here. Okay, so again, what I'm doing here, I guess you kind of get a bonus brake job. This was kind of unexpected, and I'll get to a little bit later in the video why exactly I am doing this. But the brakes on this are weird. So there's like these two little cotter pins with these like beveled edges that literally get jammed in there, and that's literally what holds the brake in, like the actual brake calipers. And I've never really seen anything like it. I know it's kind of an odd car, but the brakes are definitely odd. And the way there's actual studs that fit into the hub there, it's not nuts. You can see there's no studs actually sticking out of the hub. They actually come out from the lug nuts, if that makes sense. So everything's opposite. So those two have to line up, and that's kind of what my issue was. And basically, I kind of had to take care of that. Good news is I did have time to examine the pads and everything, and the rotor, and basically the disc, and everything looked good. So at least I don't have to worry about that. But it definitely was a pain in the butt. It was something I wasn't really expected. But again, this whole engine rebuild, of everything I had to do, brakes are so minute that I'm not even going to complain about it. So that was pretty much that. And like I said, a bit unexpected.
Alright guys, so basically what happened was the holes on the hub here weren't actually lining up with the rotor at all. So I had to take the brakes apart, so I guess you got a quick brake job to get everything lined up. It was pretty much rusted on there, so it wasn't spinning at all. I'm going to drop down for the actual axle nut later, and best way in my mind, instead of using the brakes, would be to put the weight on the ground, have the tires on, and then crank them down that way. That's the way I usually do it. So that's why those aren't torqued down or anything like that, but I will definitely be doing that later, and we'll be getting on with this project. I will probably do the other side real quick right now, and get on to the next thing.
Alright, so long story short, that was the end of the day. So this is actually day 2, the footage that you're seeing right now. And basically, long story short, what happened is I was going to try to get the 4x4 connected, and I ended up breaking the bushing when I tore it apart, so I ordered a new one. Well, I accidentally ordered the wrong one, and I wasn't able to get it in there, and I literally spent like 4 hours kicking, cussing, screaming, trying to get the stupid thing in there. Finally kind of jerry-rigged something together, but it literally took the rest of the night. So I didn't really record any of that. I didn't think it was really worthwhile. Like I said, I didn't even really do it right to begin with. So this right here is the shifter, the shift linkage, and I actually circled it right there. It's that rod you can kind of see sticking out of there if you look close. And I've never really seen a shift linkage like that before. So the first, I would say, half of this day, I really did not take enough pictures for some odd reason of the shift linkage. And it's not that complicated, and that's why I probably didn't do it. But thinking back in retrospect, I definitely should have. And the problem is, the time between I took it apart and I put it back together was almost a month. So it definitely, again, future, I would not have, if I have to do that again, I would definitely take pictures of that. This is the throttle body right here. Only reason I took it off is one of the seals kind of dropped in there. Thankfully, it didn't go down into the block. I would not be happy about that. And again, there's also a couple socket head cap screws that hold that in, just like the prop shaft. So not too difficult. That's why you see me with the Allen wrench there. And that's a whole nother. Thankfully, I took plenty of pictures of this, but the throttle body, it has so many lines that go into it between vacuum lines and fuel lines and electrical connections, and they're hidden all over the place. So thankfully, and you can see all of them right there if you look close. There's just, I don't know, like 20 things that go in there. They all have to go in a certain place in a certain order. Thankfully, most of them only go in one way, so that wasn't necessarily the most difficult to keep track of. But that was the thing I was probably worried about most this entire job, was just trying to make sure all those are connected right. Last time I had to work on this, I don't think I recorded any of that at all, but I had to take the head off or something. And when I put it back on the car when it started, and I kept blowing fuses, because actually one of those little tiny wires got frayed when I put everything back together. And that's literally all that it caused. So, and I was so close to just taking it to the shop or something. Like, I had no idea what it was, and literally all I had to do was basically put some insulation over a frayed wire, an exposed wire, because it was arcing out on some metal, and that was literally it. I mean, it was like a 1-minute fix. So next step here is the radiator. So after that, moved on to the radiator, tried to get the cooling system hooked up. The little baby radiator, again, I'm not really necessarily used to working on stuff this small, so got that in there. There's just a bracket floats on it. It's actually not that difficult compared to everything else in the car, so you can see me getting all that taken care of there. And just getting all the hoses and lines. I think after that there's a fan that goes over it. And again, there's a ton of electrical connections that go into that. Or I shouldn't say necessarily a ton, but they are a little complicated. And thankfully I did take some pictures of that. So again, there's one takeaway I could say from this project. It's not necessarily that you have to be a master mechanic to work on these or to repair an engine or do anything like that. I would say number one is keep track of everything. And thankfully, I think I was able to do this entire job without any miscellaneous bolts or screws or nuts or anything like that remaining. And it's kind of remarkable to think about, because I did not really label things the way that I should have. I did, but by the time you're done with one of these, and I don't think people realize, I mean, there's thousands of things laying all over the crotch. Like, it was a mess. And I was kind of just weekend warrioring this. You know, if it was like during the week, the work week, and I was able to work on this every day, it would have been a lot easier to keep track of things. But it was kind of like work on something, 2 weeks later work on something, 2 weeks later work on something, and yeah, definitely don't recommend doing that. So next step, alternator. This probably was, thinking back, maybe the biggest pain in the butt of the entire job. So the AC is kind of in the way there, and the way my Haynes manual and everything works out is that the AC is it's not really explained at all. It's not in the manual at all. So you kind of have to make your own predispositions on how to get around that, and it was really difficult. And that's the only reason I had to take the alternator off, is because the AC compressor was in the way, and I don't want to take any of the AC lines out. So getting that in, and there's 2 brackets for that. There's one that connects it to the AC compressor, and then one I think that connects it down at the bottom there. And yeah, like I said, kind of a pain in the butt. There are some electrical connections that go on there as well, but I would definitely not say that they're too difficult by any means. But anyway, that brings us to the end of day 2. Definitely, in my mind, a very productive day, way better than day 1. All right, day 3. So I was kind of hoping that I was actually going to get everything done by the end of the day, and kind of spoiler alert, that didn't necessarily happen. So you can see with the pry bar there, that's basically trying to get all the accessory belts on. And the way it kind of works is there's no tensioner for the accessory belt. So basically you have to pull the AC compressor and pull the alternator, and that's how you get them done. So once those were tightened up, it was basically onto the exhaust, which was not that difficult at all. So I was very blessed in the fact that the exhaust manifold came right off. I didn't have any issues with that at all. I know a lot of, especially domestic cars, it's kind of something that they're known for. I don't know if that's because it was an aluminum block or head, I should say. Definitely not an aluminum block, but an aluminum head. I had no idea, but thankfully I didn't have any issues with that. I think I only stripped one nut. But yeah, the exhaust actually wasn't too difficult. I think there's only 1 or 2 bolts that ended up snapping, but nothing major. And I was, just put a nut and a bolt through there and was able to get that done with. There is, I want to say, there's like there is an O2 sensor on this. It is fuel injected. And I think there is about like 1 ground wire or something that goes on there, but that's pretty much it. Definitely one of the easier exhausts that I've ever done. So no complaints for me on that. And then here, there's actually like another transmission mount that I kind of missed. In the beginning of the video, I mentioned how there were 2 transmission mounts and there's 1 engine mount. Well, I guess there's kind of 3 in a weird way. There's this really weird one on the side, and I was getting that knocked out with. And I want to say after that, there's the brush guard right there. That's like kind of the final step before doing the hood. So this is I had some issues with some of the exhaust nuts here. That's me just getting them taken care of. I had the springs on the wrong side, which is, I guess, kind of on me. I've never really seen them that style before. But yeah, this is getting all the fluids done. So basically oil, coolant, and gear oil. So that's getting the antifreeze put in there. And another weird thing, there's no like spot put it in the radiator. You have to go through the overflow, which I don't really necessarily like, especially when it's bone dry, because you're kind of running it without coolant there for a little while before it gets sucked in. That's me putting some oil in there. It only, I don't know, it takes like 3.5 quarts, or doesn't take too much. Obviously, it's a pretty small engine, so pretty much filling up there. And I had a few like kind of half full ones, so in a weird way I was kind of glad to get rid of that. They say in the manual you should use 15W40, which is more of like a diesel type oil. But basically, from all the forums and everything I read, they recommend to use a 10W40. I'm definitely a full synthetic guy, so basically you can see me putting that in there. And then after that, it's just the gear oil, which is an 80W90. The reason I'm telling everybody this is in case if you ever end up with a Panda, you know what to put in it. And thankfully, this is all normal stuff, so you don't need to order anything odd or specially, which is very nice. And again, checking the level there real quick. And yeah, should be raising it up here and changing out the gear oil. And once that's filled up, then we're on to starting up the engine and seeing how it runs. That's pretty much it, with the exception of the hood and the brush guard. Alright, so I'm not going to bore you too much. This is pretty much just reattaching the hood. We waited till we got the vehicle started before we attached the hood or the brush guard or anything like that. I figured that'd probably be a good idea in case something wrong happens. So when I took the hood off, I marked everything, I marked the hinges and everything. It's very easy to get these crooked, but that is pretty much it for the hood.
Day 4, engine sounds good, working great, don't have a clutch, gonna have to drop the transmission back off. Think there's something going on with the clutch fork, so we'll see what happens. Alright. Try putting it in gear. Is it going in? No. Alright, stop. Turn it off. Alright, so I thought I had to rip the entire transmission off, and it turns out, get some lighting in here, this cable has to go through that hole down there, and it wasn't in there, so I wasn't getting enough tension to pull the cable. So I'll put that in there, readjust it to where it was, bingo, golden, we got a clutch, so all done.
Alright, thank you guys for watching. So that is the end of the engine rebuild for the Fiat Panda. Everything's good and running. I did have some issues later on. Basically, one of the spark plugs gave out, and there's a whole plethora of issues that came from that. But anyway, long story short, I replaced the spark plugs and basically confirmed the timing and everything, and we're good to go. So what's up next? Basically, the actual exotic flips, what's going to be happening with this Panda. So I am, if you haven't seen any of my previous videos, I'm getting a lot of NEVA coming in pretty soon, and I kind of don't really necessarily have the space. I don't need I'm already at 5 vehicles right now. I really don't need to have, keep on adding to that. So the idea is going to be I sell the Panda, that'll open up some room for the NEVA. Hopefully I'll have a ton of footage from that. Whether I'm going to flip that or not, I don't really know. I kind of plan on holding on to that for a while, but we'll see what happens with that. And I think basically right now, given that the engine is newly rebuilt, according to the machine specs, like 300-400 miles is kind of like the wear-in time before I can start driving it normally. So I'm going to have it driven around for a couple of weeks, put a few hundred miles on it, rechange the oil, rechange the filter, if there's any crud that got left in it during the engine rebuild or the cylinders or anything like that. Get that out of there. Make sure it's not burning oil anymore. That's the entire purpose of me going through this process. And then put it up either on Marketplace or on auction and see what happens. And that'll be the end of at least the season. For the next vehicle, I guess, I do have some ideas. So we'll see what happens with that. But that's pretty much it for the Panda. So basically, as far as mechanically everything goes, that is it. And we'll see what happens in the future. I'm excited. So thank you for watching.